what do we mean when we say best interest of the child? It's quite a complicated subject because it varies from child to child, from family to family. And so the legal definition itself is more of a framework. So they use the welfare checklist to consider the main elements of a child's life and kind of try and assess what the current situation is against that checklist, along with other like social work tools that Kafka use as well. But I wanted to talk today about the nuances within that to give you a better idea of not only what they're looking for, but also how to present your case. And most importantly, how do you keep doing what is in the child's best interest when you're dealing with a high conflict, narcissistic, manipulative ex? The key things really that people are looking for, and I break it down into physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual safety. Now, they don't use those terms, but it's a really easy way for me to remember it. So, what they're looking at is this child physically safe? Sometimes with narcissistic parents, they can over chastise them, they can sometimes use physical punishment, they can put them at risk sometimes by not supervising them properly. So there are some elements around their welfare in the physical area. The main ones are within the emotional. So looking at emotional neglect, emotional manipulation, emotional abuse, they're the main areas. They're not easy to prove, by the way, which we'll have a look at. The mental, again, is looking at how do they support their growth, their mental growth? Do they do their homework with them? Do they support extracurricular activities in your time as well as in theirs? Or do they over push them? Although I've said physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, there's crossover between all of them. It just gives you an idea of what they're really looking for is how is a child being cared for in these main areas? Are they thriving in their school, for example? That's one area that they might look at. And how are the parents impacting that? So it, in terms of like custody, this plays an important role in the best interest of the child because relationships play such an important role in whether we are in survival mode or whether we are thriving or just about surviving. It's really important for you to understand how relationships, now, when I say relationships, I'm not always talking about the best quality relationship either, obviously, but relationships are core to us as human beings having a good life, being successful, whether that be academically, whether that be emotionally, whether that be in relationship, on all areas of success. Our relationships play a key part in that. And ultimately, that does come down to our attachment style. Having a relationship with both parents, we know from research, is the healthiest thing for children. Children do so much better when they have a good quality relationship with both parents. Now, key term there being good quality. And that's the bit that is difficult in high conflict cases. How do you prove the quality of the relationship? Because that's really what you're looking for when we talk about the best interest, is we're asking the court to weigh up a relationship versus a poor quality relationship and knowing the risk on both sides of that and asking the court to make a decision on that. So this is where a lot of the difficulty comes for parents, is how do I get across that actually the relationship is causing more harm than good, and actually understanding, is that true? Because not having a parent in your life is very, very harmful for a child. And again, there's a ton of research around that. But again, it comes down to the quality of the relationship. And we are not looking for perfect. So when we look at 50-50, for example, people get hung up on this idea of 50-50, like it's the child is a cake and you cut it down the middle and then you argue over, well, that's got more cream and that's got more sponge, whatever your preference is. Children are not cakes. Children are human beings, and time with them should not be split in that way. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be equal. And I think that's the key distinction here is it's about equal quality of time with each parent. So I'll give you an example. A parent who say wants Monday to Friday and weekends with them. The other parent can have them Monday to Friday. I'll have them every weekend. One, that isn't 50-50 anyway, from a actual clock. If you look at a clock, that's not 50-50. The time difference is seemingly more beneficial to the other parent who has them Monday to Friday. But when you look at the quality of time, actually the parent that gets them at the weekend is getting the better quality time because they're not having to deal with all the stress of the school run. They're not having to deal with getting their sandwiches ready for lunch, doing their homework with them, getting them to bed, dealing with all the anxiety that they bring home with them. They get to have fun weekends. So that's really important when you're considering what you want in terms of the child's best interest is the child wants quality time with you over quantity of time. So just bear that in mind. So how do high conflict cases complicate this whole best interest and the decision making process to get there? We know, again, from research that conflict is harmful to children. They do not do well. It's a traumatic environment for them, which can damage their brain structure. It can obviously impact their sense of self, their attachment. It is harmful for them. And whilst a lot of people will say, well, I'm not the one bringing the conflict, if you look at what conflict really is, it's two people disagreeing or two countries disagreeing. The conflict itself isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about the disagreement and the environment that that creates. And so for the child, when you've got two parents who are usually completely diametrically opposed to what the other one wants, one person wants one thing, the other says the exact opposite. That is conflict. Whether you believe that you are right, it is still conflict for the child. And again, this is just important for you to know for your child what position they are in. Now, this is not to say give them everything they want, give the other parent everything they want so the child is not conflict, because some people will continue to create conflict regardless of what you give them. They'll just want more and more and more and more because actually what they want is the conflict. I definitely recommend putting boundaries in place. Again, I am not talking about a rollover. And what I'm saying is when we're looking at the best interest of the child, you have to understand that from the court's perspective, the disagreement is what they're labeling the conflict. They're not necessarily saying you are or they are. They're saying there's a disagreement and therefore that is harmful to the child. Part of your work and part of why I wrote the court prep toolkit and all the resources on Get Court Ready is so that you can start to present why there is that conflict, where it's coming from, what you're disagreeing with, i.e., why there is that conflict, what you're bringing to the table of conflict, why you're standing up for that, and therefore how to reduce that conflict by enforcing those boundaries. And ultimately, that's what a court order really is. It's a legal boundary to protect the child's best interests. So obviously with coercive control, false allegations, alienation, all of those factors in these types of cases muddy the waters. They make it look as though you are either both as bad as each other or actually you're the one who is bringing the conflict. They will use Darbo to blame you. You are the one that is abusive. Therefore, the court should side with them. The conflict, the disagreement is because you're abusive. This is why it's hard for courts sometimes. And I'm not condoning courts or making excuses for them. I'm just stating facts here from someone who looks from the outside sometimes, and do find that a really helpful perspective to have. You can understand why it is so complicated. They don't have the years of experience that you have with this person. They are just seeing what is being presented to them. And they're brilliant at presenting themselves. This is why I created the Corporate Toolkit to help you be brilliant at presenting your story so that you can come across as powerfully and as credible as they do in telling their lies, because their lies do sound credible because they believe them to be true. You, on the other hand, are traumatized. And so you do come across as less credible. And so, again, this is why I created what I created with the corporate toolkit, was to level that playing field for you. So that with all of these tactics that are designed to muddy those waters, to make it very smoke and mirrors. What's the truth? What's going on here? I always think of that Little Britain woo kind of thing when I did that. But it is about that mistake of what is the truth here? And those tactics are all designed purposefully to make everyone question the reality. What is really going on here? So when Kafka's officers and judges are looking at this from the outside, like I say, they don't have the full picture of what's going on. They don't have the video of the event. They just have a Polaroid. Your job is to give them that relevant context. Your job is to put across why the conflict exists, why this disagreement is happening, why you can't agree on what is in the child's best interest between you, why you are so far apart in that, then it's the court's job to decide based on the facts that they are presented with. Usually, again, these cases are complicated, and emotionally seductive people are very good at playing the victim. So, again, that's why I provide the resources to help you counter a lot of that. They look at this Polaroid and try and make some decisions, and you need to provide more of that video. You need to provide them with more of that context, but in a very factual, objective way. How do we protect the children's best interests in family court? Evidence is your key point here, but not just in terms of what you're presenting in terms of the evidence, but how you're presenting it. They are very good at telling their story. They believe it. They've spent their entire life blaming everyone else for their difficult situation. They have spent their entire life building this false version, this false self that is a victim, that is designed to lure people in so that they can control them and therefore control their environment, because they're very fear-based. They are based on this idea that, oh my God, my world is scary. And if the more I can control of the world, the safer it will be. And that includes people and children. And so that's the environment and that's the mentality that they go in with, is wanting to control that. And that can be very credible. They can sound very reasonable, very logical in what they are saying. But that's because people don't understand the personality disorder element of this. You, on the other hand, have got complex post-traumatic stress disorder. You're all over the place. You're barely surviving because your brain is firing up on triggers all the time. Your ex is re-triggering you. Kafka's questions are triggering you. The judge's way that they respond to you is triggering you. Everything in your world is triggering you. So your fear is there for everyone to see. It is out, but it's been misinterpreted as being unstable. And how we deal with fear is different for each individual. Some people get really angry when they're afraid. Some people get controlling. Some people get tearful. How we react to fear, whether it's our fight or flight response, and what that looks like, that's the bit that you have control over. You can work on that. You can work on your fear. You can work on your trauma. You can work on your triggers. And that will help you present your case better and present the facts of your case better. So have a structure. Again, I've developed master your evidence and evidence tracker for you to be able to do that. You deal with your trauma and triggers and know exactly what's going to happen. That's the bulk of the corporate toolkit, is preparing you for exactly what's going to come up, helping you with your trauma and triggers through the I Am Safe trauma recovery tools. And so that you can present with more credibility and confidence in what you're saying, so that you can get across your points much clearer. That's one part of it. The other part of this is the impact that this has on you and therefore your child during the process. Whilst you are traumatized, whilst you are in this process and your traumas are bubbling under the surface all the time, your child is still caught in that conflict. And I describe it as the child in a prison within a war zone. So if they choose to escape the prison, they still are within a war zone. And so whilst you are creating that war zone, you are part of that. But through this conflict, again, I don't want you to think I'm blaming you for this, because I hope that I've explained what conflict is enough for you to understand that it's about that difference, and it's not about, you might be perfectly right in what you're saying, but the fact is that difference is what's creating the conflict. When you are able to learn to manage your trauma and manage your triggers and manage your emotions, regulate your emotions, then you create a much safer environment and reduce your inner conflict for your children. And that's the safety that they need in this process. And that is the absolute best way to protect their best interests going forward, is for you to work on yourself, to heal your own inner conflict. You being able to recognize when you are triggered and calm yourself much faster. It's not about not being triggered. We all get triggered. We all have a reaction to life. We're humans. We're meant to have that. We're not trying to become Cybermen. This is about you recognizing, oh, hang on a minute, I'm having a nervous system reaction to this. And so, oh, I need to just remember my coping mechanisms and calm myself. And that regulation helps your child, because they're going to come to you dysregulated because they are caught in this conflict. And the other parent will bring that conflict to them. They will triangulate them into this conflict and try and get them to take sides to strengthen their argument. And so they're going to bring that to you. And if you are unable to manage that, then you are creating that war zone around them. You are co-creating that. Again, please don't think that that's blame. This is about self-empowerment. This is about helping you know you have far more power in this than you believe. You can make a difference in ways that maybe you hadn't considered. So the final thing for this is just to summarize, that is, in court itself, stay child focused, be mindful of your part in this, be clear on how you present your case so that you aren't coming across as being controlling, that you aren't coming across as being high conflict yourself. And again, that's understanding your own coping mechanisms, your own reaction to trauma and triggers. When you're able to do that, you will present completely differently. And so your ex won't be able to use that narrative against you. And that will help the judge to see, actually, this is someone who has really considered all aspects of this. When you are traumatized, we call it the window of tolerance. You can only see through a tiny section. When you heal yourself more and you heal your nervous system, you expand that window so you can see a broader perspective. You can see things from other people's perspective. And even if you don't agree with their perspective, by being able to demonstrate to professionals that you can understand and see why they might feel that way, or give that perspective of not just seeing it through your own eyes, that shows empathy, and it shows a stability, an emotional stability. And these are all things that protect your child's best interests, not just within the court process and in getting the best result for them, but also in your home environment and protecting what's in their best interest as well. If you are interested in finding out more about the Court Prep Toolkit, I have left the link in the description below. Take care, everyone.